There is something maddening about a repetitive, consistent sound, don't you agree? The narrator of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart is driven mad by the non-stop beating of a heart coming from beneath his floorboards. But even something less horrible than a disembodied heartbeat can fray a person's nerves. Superficially less horrible, anyway. Something as simple as, say, the relentless ticking of a clock. After all, what could be more frightening than a reminder of the sands of time passing through our fingers, of the finite steps on life's long and winding road? We have the answer to that question. The scariest thing of all is the monster waiting on the other side of the road, twisted and hungry. The thing that strikes when the ticking eventually stops, when time is up. Tick. Tock, tick, tock. Many years ago, a clockmaker in the German town of Freiburg was renowned for his ability to produce exquisite personalized clocks for his clientele all across town, the country, and even beyond. His unparalleled constructions made him the only man to reach out to when it came to getting your hands on a beautiful, ornate timepiece that would ease the anxieties of the passing hours. He ate, slept, and breathed clocks. It was his life, his calling. As such, the clockmaker had grown accustomed to the sound of ticking. He heard it in the morning when he awoke to the cry of his cuckoo clock. He listened to it all day in his workshop as he repaired and constructed clocks of all shapes and sizes. And it was the sound that lulled him to sleep at night after each long, hard day. It gave life a pleasant rhythm. One day, however, he noticed a particularly loud, repetitive sound had permeated his home. It was rhythmic, like the ticking of his clocks, but harsher somehow. It did not gently tick, but rather cracked, like the way his knees popped when a harsh winter was coming. Something in it made his stomach ache with dread. He began taking apart every clock in his workshop, looking for the source of the sound, but still, it persisted. He sat there at his desk, surrounded by gears and pieces of wood, glass, and metal, and still, the sound pounded against his eardrums. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The clockmaker was stumped by the mysterious ticking noise. It felt too real, too vivid to be some kind of hallucination. He would have bet every clock he ever made that the noise was coming from outside of his head. He was a man so astute in his clock-making abilities that he could tell his own creations apart in the dark from the mere timbre of their ticking. But here, he was in the presence of an alien force. This frightening, almost predatory sound that lingered in his periphery, always somewhere, but not confined to any fixed point. He was reminded vaguely of Peter Pan, of the crocodile that had eaten Captain Hook's hand and alarm clock, which survived and continued ticking in the literal belly of the beast. Hook, a vicious pirate captain, would become a gibbering wreck when the ticking sound got closer. Did he fear the predator whom the ticking foretold? Or the passage of time that pushed him further into the Reaper's fold in the otherwise immortal plain of Neverland? Tick, tock, tick, tock. The clockmaker's search continued. He turned his workplace upside down and inside out in pursuit of this seemingly sourceless ticking. He checked every hiding place, every closet, cupboard, cubbyhole, and cabinet. Nothing. He moved the furniture, tied up the curtains, rolled up all the carpets. Nothing. In his desperation, he took a claw hammer from his toolbox and began prying the rusty nails from the ground, before peeling up the floorboards and checking the dusty, spider-infested spaces underneath. Perhaps some mechanism had fallen down there, or had always been there, just ticking away. There had to be something down there, but no, only dirt, insects, and shadows. Maybe he was going mad. Maybe it was tinnitus, or the indelible impression that hearing years upon years of ticking had left in his mind, the way an image is burned into a plasma screen if it's left there for too long. Maybe it was some shadowy government agency trying to drive him mad with the use of some new sound-based torture device. Oral terrorism, selective auditory subliminal mind control, Havana syndrome, the fizzling edges of sanity egged on by the invisible long-range CIA telesound beams. There had to be some kind of explanation. But whatever the case, the sound persisted. Tick-tock, tick-tock. He couldn't stay there in the dismembered ruins of his prestigious clockmaking shop any longer. He was clearly under a lot of stress here. Not healthy, not good for the mind. He decided to close the shop for a few days and go visit his daughter and her family. Some time with his beloved relatives would soothe his frayed nerves. So he packed his bag and made the trip, hoping that leaving work behind for a few days would also loosen up his mind. But the entire drive to his daughter's house, he could have sworn he still heard the sound, keeping perfect time as it cracked again and again. He shook his head, scolding himself for imagining things. There was nothing in the car that could be making that noise. He'd focused on it too much. Surely that's why he was obsessing over it now. All this had a rational explanation, he simply thought himself. He'd simply thought himself into a corner on this one. Wouldn't that explain all of this? All just a trick in the mind of an overworked clockmaker sorely in need of a good sabbatical in the country. This wouldn't be forever. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The clockmaker's daughter greeted him at the door with a warm embrace and a hearty meal, and for a little while he relaxed. The sound of good company and laughter drowned out the infernal ticking. He began to entertain the notion that perhaps the ticking had been a good thing. It had been a long time since he'd seen his daughter, and that ticking, as frightening as it had been, was also the only thing that pushed him away from the workshop for a while. He was somewhat grateful for a good excuse to take time off. Perhaps that was what it was all about, a reminder to take it easy. After a weekend off, he'd be right as rain, surely. But that night, as he tried to fall asleep, the sound was there again, taunting him, keeping his eyes open wide and his heart rate climbing. Was it the dark of the room magnifying his hearing, intensifying that awful ticking, or was it louder and closer than ever before? It felt as though an invisible clock, like so many he'd made before, was hanging over him. But what was holding it? That awful, awful sound. Like the bubbles popping in the synovial fluids of a person's aged and crumbling joints. Too organic, too fleshy. And it just kept getting louder and closer, louder and closer, louder and closer. Tick-tock. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. Until suddenly, it went silent. He breathed a sigh of relief and closed his eyes. The clockmaker's daughter woke to the sound of her father's piercing guttural screams. She ran to his room to find the bedsheets soaked with blood, the bedroom window shattered, and her father gone without a trace. She went to the police the next day, but they could do nothing for her. Her father had not been the victim of an ordinary murderer or thief, but something outside the realm of understanding. It was something ancient, something mysterious, something monstrous, something anomalous. Though the police could do nothing, another organization was secretly on the case, the SCP Foundation. After the clockmaker's disappearance, operatives searched the area and discovered the culprit, which they captured and designated SCP-4975. SCP-4975 is a humanoid entity with bird-like features, the most notable of which is a sharp, pointed beak. Its body is long and thin, with bony limbs with tapered points, with no discernible digits of any kind. Its body, including its beak, is covered with a thick, hard layer of skin. The entity's most notable feature is not its appearance, however, but in its skeleton, particularly its spine. The cervical vertebrae of the creature are not interconnected and are capable of independent movement. They rotate one vertebra at a time, from back to front in order, all the way up to the entity's head, in a particular rhythm. This produces the clicking or cracking sound that is so terribly familiar to its intended victims. It repeats the motion constantly, over and over again, only stopping when it's preparing to attack its chosen prey. SCP-4975 does not kill impulsively, simply selecting a convenient victim. Instead, it stalks its prey for months at a time, sometimes even a year, following them in darkness, hiding just out of sight. The only sign of its presence is that sound, the clicking, cracking, tick, tock, tick, tock of its bones as it bides its time, knowing that it can wait as long as it needs or wants to before it strikes. When it's ready to feast, it will beat and tear at the victim's body with the tapered points of its limbs, shredding the flesh and pecking at it much like a vulture rips at a fresh carcass. Then it can savor its meal, using the body as food for about 3 months before it needs to hunt again. Though its exact age is unknown, it is theorized that the creature is hundreds if not thousands of years old. Written evidence of its existence has been traced back as far as the 1500s. There are mentions of a creature resembling SCP-4975 throughout German folklore, appearing in carvings, paintings, folktales, and nursery rhymes. One such nursery rhyme was discovered and translated by the Foundation during the research process. Though its rhyme scheme was lost when it was translated to English, the eerie feeling it evokes was not. The rhyme goes, tick, tock, the cuckoo clock ticks. Cuckoo, the bird inside sings. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. As it ticks the time, so ticks your heart. May you live long as you hear its song. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Listen close, for when it stops, the hatchling comes out of its home. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, tick. Did you hear it? Did it stop? My child, it meant your time was up. The research team theorized that this nursery rhyme, and others like it, was used to warn children about potential indicators of danger from SCP-4975 and teach them to be wary of its hunting patterns. Knowledge, after all, is one of the best weapons in anyone's arsenal when it comes to the anomalous. Without much more knowledge than this little poem provides, and what they had observed prior to SCP-4975's capture, the SCP Foundation did its best to create adequate containment measures for the creature. Currently, SCP-4975 is kept in a standard steel containment cell and is prohibited from any direct human contact. It can be observed via security footage, but no human beings are permitted to go inside, lest they serve as the creature's next meal. If a containment breach occurs, any personnel that report hearing a repetitive cracking or ticking sound are to be isolated until the entity has been captured and placed back in its cell, or until the sound stops. Though SCP-4975 is currently contained, there is a chance that its captive state does not actually make it any less lethal. After a harrowing incident that sent many attending researchers to the on-site psychologist's office, the Foundation was given reason to believe that containing it does not actually stop it from hunting. On September 16, 2002, something horrible happened near the Black Forest in Germany. A team of Foundation operatives had been placed in the area to monitor a man from Freiburg who had complained to the local police about a clicking sound that had been following him around for quite some time. Over the course of 4 months of being unable to escape the sound, or the feeling that he was being watched no matter where he went, he had become convinced that someone was stalking him. It was a bizarre situation, and he wasn't certain how his stalker was making this maddening sound, but he believed his life to be in danger. Concerned that this could be the work of SCP-4975, the Foundation operatives took him into custody. The police were given a cover story, claiming that the man was experiencing a sense of paranoia as well as auditory hallucinations as a result of side effects from chemotherapy. Once the Foundation operatives explained to the man that they meant him no harm, believed him about his fears, and wished to help, he opened up about his experiences. He told the operatives that in addition to the sound and the feeling of something following him, he had seen a monstrous figure in the woods. He had kept the details to himself when speaking to the police, afraid they would have him committed rather than listening to him. The operatives asked him to lead them to the place where he had seen the monster, and he agreed. The man led the team to a densely wooded part of the forest, trees blocking out the sunlight, until their surroundings became as dark as if it were the middle of the night. As they walked deeper and deeper into the forest, the man became increasingly anxious. His breath came in short, strained gasps. His eyes darted from tree to tree, and he jumped at the slightest sound of a twig snapping beneath someone's foot or branches rustling in a gust of wind. Suddenly, mid-stride, he froze. His eyes were wide. His face was white as a sheet. With a trembling hand, he pointed toward a nearby tree. In a voice so faint it was almost a whisper, he said, "There." The operatives turned to look, but saw nothing there. The man repeated, "There," but they couldn't see anything but the trees. The man stumbled back, going weak at the knees from pure terror, and continued to point at the empty space next to the tree. Just as one operative was turning to another to comment that their witness must be out of his mind, the man suddenly collapsed onto the ground as if an invisible, powerful force had thrown him down. The man screamed for help, struggling against the unseen attacker as it slashed at his face and his chest, tearing through fabric and skin, blood spraying across the forest floor. Two officers drew their weapons, firing at where they guessed the assailant might be, but their bullets ricocheted uselessly off nearby tree trunks. Another rushed to the man on the ground, grabbing him under the arms and attempting to pull him out of harm's way. However, the man would not budge, as the invisible force held him in place, shredding through his stomach as it fought to keep its prey. Afraid to rip open the stomach wound any further, the operatives quickly ceased his attempts to move the man. Instead, he pulled out his weapon and did the only merciful thing he could think to do. He shot the local man in the head, putting him out of his misery before he was ripped to shreds. The operatives watched, some in silent shock, some continuing to fire their weapons, some vomiting from sheer disgust, as strips of the dead man's flesh ripped off of bone and disappeared, one piece at a time. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, surveillance footage of SCP-4975's containment site picked up some peculiar activity in the creature's cell. It stopped rotating its neck, which it had done almost constantly since being captured, and stared at the corner of its containment cell. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, and it did not move a muscle. It stayed still for several minutes, until it eventually broke the unsettling stillness to eat, greedily gobbling down slices of meat. There was one problem, though. The creature had not yet been fed that day. All Foundation operatives dispatched to Germany to investigate SCP-4975 were recalled back to their original sites, and additional research has been suspended until further notice. In light of this new information, a motion has been filed to reclassify the creature as Keter, and potentially impossible to contain with the Foundation's current resources. As terrible as it is to admit, this is one monster the Foundation has not yet found a way to stop. They may have it locked in a cage, but it can still hunt anyone, anywhere, anytime it wants to. Wait a second. Shh. Be very, very quiet. What's that sound? In your room, right now. Listen closely. Shh. Tick, tick, tick. Do you hear it? Don't worry. It's probably just a clock or a kitchen timer. Maybe it's just your imagination. Tick, tick, tick. Whatever it is, I'm sure you'll be fine. There's nothing dangerous about a weird sound from time to time. You don't have anything to fear unless it suddenly goes silent. That's when you're really in trouble. When you know SCP-4975 is about to strike, to devour you alive. Wait, stop. Hold your breath. Don't make a single beep. Do you hear it? Neither do I. Now go check out SCP-2316, The Bodies in the Water, and SCP-966, Sleep Killer, for more haunting anomalies from the SCP Foundation.